Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our reaction and review for The Bear Season 2, Episode 6. This episode, titled Fishes, is probably the weirdest Christmas special I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, aren't Christmas specials supposed to be timeless where you want to sit back and watch them every year and have a smile?
Listen, like, it's Christmas time now, so the fact that this was a Christmas episode, I know we're covering the bear a little bit later, but, like, it was nice to have a Christmas episode during the holidays. I mean, of course, this was chaotic and
Yeah.
wild, but there was a lot of information in this episode, and the guest cast, oh my goodness, it was so good. 10 out of 10. Sarah Paulson? Oh, Jamie Lee Curtis. Oh, Bob Odenkirk. I was dying. Like, this cast is incredible.
This is one of those instances where I'm really grateful that I did not seek out any of this information in advance. Like, I didn't know these people were on the show. I didn't know that John
No.
Mulaney was going to show up here as Stevie. I didn't know that, one episode after I make a community joke about the title for this last episode, here comes Gillian Jacobs and she's on this show too. I'm just like, wow, okay,
I
okay.
couldn't believe the cast. Like, I had heard Jamie Lee Curtis was on the show, but, like, not Bob,
Uh,
not Sarah Paulson. Sarah Paulson. I was like, oh my God, I almost didn't recognize her.
Yeah, they did a really good job of blending in. Yes, I think it was. I mean, after you see all these people collectively, you tend to think, okay, yeah, obviously the bear wanted some big name stars, but I believed all of them as these characters.
Yeah.
That's really important. I will say, yeah, I'll give my hot take now in fear of being chased out of the room later on in this
Okay.
video.
All right. I have my hard hat on. Let's just have it.
I would never watch this episode
Oh my
again.
God, what are you
And
saying?
I'm not saying it's bad because I don't think it's bad. It's just this episode made me so stressed out and so uncomfortable in a way that's just like I don't want to if I want to feel squeamish. I don't want to feel squeamish, especially around Christmas. Like it is really well done.
Watching Carmi's mom butter bread with her hands, just take the butter and butter the bread. I was really squeamish over that. I was like, oh, and we all get to eat that now. She's got sauce on the ceiling, sauce everywhere, and she's just like, it's like, oh, and then she's hugging people with these full butter hands. I was like, oh my God, that was the most uncomfortable thing to watch.
Okay, you can freak out over the butter hands. I am still paralyzed in fear over Bernthal and the forks.
And the
Because
40 gate.
I just
What a fight.
I was there at the table. I was terrified. This is why if I was actually at this event, I would never go to the Berzano family Christmas ever again. I don't invite me. I'm not going. And it's just like I had this experience. I will remember this episode forever. I do not need to attend this Christmas dinner again. I'm good.
No, it was wild. And we are going to get into all the specifics of it. But
Yeah.
before we do, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us here at the channel. And, we really, really appreciate your support.
Yeah, we really, really do. I gotta say, just in general, I
Mhm.
was worried at the start of this episode because, for starters, this is a much longer episode than anything else the bear has done.
Yeah.
And then on top of all that, it was entirely a flashback. So from the get-go, it was kind of clear, okay, there's not going to be any Sydney, we're not going to have any Marcus. This is just going to be all about Carmi and his family. Is this going to work? And for the purpose of what this episode is, which I do not believe is for like my express entertainment that I'm going to want to watch this forever. I don't think that's what they were trying to do. But for the story they were trying to tell, man, did they ever nail it.
Yeah. They gave us so much information in this episode. I mean, learning about how sugar got her name, that she put in, a cup of sugar instead of a cup of salt into the gravy. Ha ha. Now
Yeah.
you're sugar forever. Or sort of getting that moment, which was, oh my God, it was so good. That moment with Mikey and Carmi, where they were in the pantry getting the saltines because, we had Richie's wife was pregnant at the time. So this
Yeah.
was, many years in the past at this point. That conversation where it was like, he's like, yeah, Carmen's like, oh, I'm out in, Copenhagen. I'm, working at this restaurant, living on this boat, feeding this invisible cat, which we just know that Marcus is doing too. where he's like, listen, like, man, I feel like I have so many ideas for the beef. I can come back. Like, here's this really touching gift that he has sketched out everything for him and his brother to do this together.
Yeah.
And his brother's just like, oh my God, I know that I can't let this happen. As much as I want this to happen, I've really wrecked this whole
Yeah.
establishment. Like, I'm so in debt, and that comes a little bit later in this episode too, from Lee, of like, oh, you're living at your mom's house and you're borrowing money from everybody, and you can't keep anything afloat, and you're using, and all these other things that are coming out. But Carmi doesn't really know any of that. He's still like, hey, it's you and me, bro. We're going to do this together. We're going to let it rip. I've got all these ideas. I can help change it. Where Mikey, after, he leaves, really breaks down, because he's just like, he knows he can't let Carmi in there, or it is going to ruin his brother. He is not going to let that happen to him, even if his brother hates him for it. I was like, oh, ow, oh no.
It's such a fascinating story because we're getting almost all of this from the vantage point of Carmi, who's basically an outsider from his own family because he has been away, and
Yeah.
while he stayed in contact, like, he doesn't know the full story of just about anything. So he
No.
is wandering into this scenario that he doesn't fully understand, with characters that are battling like a million more demons than he really imagines. And Mikey is front and center for all of this. Like,
Yeah.
this is a guy who's clearly struggling, who's clearly just sad, having a hard time envisioning any sort of future, who's quick-tempered in a way. And Bernthal is great. He's just so good at playing this specific type of character.
I know. He's just, even though how the quietness of it, when
Yeah.
he is getting into that fight with Lee and he's throwing forks at him,
Yeah.
the quietness of his anger to like turn next to him and be like, hey,
Yeah.
can I borrow your fork? I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, it's just so like, this is going to erupt.
Yes. Boy, did it ever. And this is the thing that really got me, was that during the entire exchange, where we see a brief sort of ceasefire to what's going on here with the forks, and eventually I'm just sitting back being like, okay, when's the next fork going to be thrown? Like, this is not it. This is not it. How ugly is it going to get? And eventually
Oh, for sure.
the next fork is thrown. And Odenkirk did a good job too of sort of playing this very, he's just not a likable character, Lee. Like, he's just not in any way, but it's just because it's Odenkirk and he does have that comedic timing. There's a split second where you want to sort of understand him a little bit more, but then you just can't because he's so unlikable.
Oh, the minute that he was just like repeating, you're nothing, you're nothing, you're nothing. I'm like, oh, he's just such a terrible person. Like, Mikey is down on his luck. He's having a hard time. He's dealing with addiction. He's losing money. He's hurting his shop. He's staying at his mom's house. Like, there's a lot of things that are happening to him that are all very difficult to deal with while you're also battling with addiction. And to just have somebody who's not even really family, I mean, just be like, you're nothing, you're not, how could you do this to your mom? Like, it's just like, get out.
Yeah, like, just shut up. Nothing good came from these people being together. And
No.
ultimately, I mean, my tinfoil hat is on for this. I wonder how many of them would have left or consider leaving were it not for the fact, and as we were reminded throughout this entire episode, that Donna basically spent the entirety of this day in the kitchen making this big elaborate feast. And I think because of that, everybody felt obligated that they had to be there. They had to sit through the fork flinging, which just reminded me at a certain point of the Blue Raja from Mystery Men, a movie that Jess and I love and not a single person other than the two of us remember.
I love the shoveler.
I shovel well. No, I really just feel like it was not in anyone's best interest to be there at that dinner table at a certain point, but they couldn't leave because they were so afraid of what it would mean.
Listen, Donna, oh man,
Yeah.
my heart really broke for her in so many different ways when she was talking to Carmi, and she was just like, I worked so hard in this kitchen to make this beautiful meal for everybody, and I just want someone to do something beautiful for me. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there, not maybe on the level that she's going through it, but I think there's a lot of people out there that understand that. People who really put a lot into their families and don't always get back, or
Mhm.
don't get back in a way that could fill up their love tank to make them feel like, I want to do this again, or, they really appreciated it. And that's why Stevie's grace was like so important, I think. And it was the thing that really did fill her up, where he was like, I don't want to, I don't want to give this grace,
Yeah.
but I'm going to. And there was a good portion of it that was just like, thank you so much for everything that you did. This beautiful meal that we all get to sit down
Yeah.
at because of you and the time that you've put into this for us. Like, thank you so much. And then all the thank yous are coming through. And you can see it's really means a lot to her, that she's really like, oh my goodness, like, okay, maybe my family does appreciate me, maybe not all the time, but they do in this moment. Until, of course, Sugar asks the question she was told at the beginning of the episode not to ask, which is, are you okay?
Yeah, that's the thing that completely undoes basically everything else that has happened leading into all of it. Like, the Stevie's grace was really good, very authentic for the bear. It is the most serious I've ever seen John Mulaney. I guess I've seen some of his stand up, I've seen him on SNL, but it was very genuine. Like, it came across as something that would really have an impact. But yeah, that one moment from Sugar just sends everything spiraling out. Like, clearly Donna's not okay, but she wants to believe that she is. And, hearing a question like that it's going to set her off. And it did. It set her off in a very, very bad way.
Yeah, I mean, she crashed a car straight through the
Yeah.
living room, and it was so chaotic. And that's where, we really kind of got to get into the talk of it. Now,
Yeah.
we haven't watched ahead. We don't really know what was going on. So this is just fresh. I know you guys all know,
Yeah.
so, don't spoil it for us. But what is going on with her? Because we did see Sugar pouring alcohol down the sink. So it was like, okay, is this part of it, that she's drinking too much? She's drinking every day. She's
Mhm.
battling this. Is this part of it? Is this all of it? Then it's sort of like, is there something else with mental health that's going on that we don't know about? Because she is very high and low, high and low. Is that something else that's maybe just undiagnosed and not being treated? Or there was also this moment where she was talking alone with Carmi, where she was crying in the kitchen. He was just really trying to reach her. And at one point, she just like said, Michael, please go back to the table. And his face just was like, Michael, like, is this part of, mental health problems? Is this the drinking? Is this early onset Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that? And it was just a few moments later that she looked at him and was called him by his full name. But I
Yeah.
mean, that is absolutely an early sign of early dementia or Alzheimer's. My grandmother had it. I know there's lots of you out there that have had family members that have gone through that. So you know what I'm talking about, that definitely is an early sign of that, right?
Mhm.
And there's no answers in this episode of what is going on. Is it one of these things, two of these things, three of these things? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Well, you guys probably know, but we don't know.
No, we don't know. I think you're onto something with the early onset dementia, just because it feels like with the bear, everything that's put into the scripts is very, very intentional. And they do all of this for a reason. And even if they don't spell it out in the next couple of episodes as to what's going on here, I think we can make a certain measure of assumption that, calling one of your children by the wrong name and then getting the name right just a moment later, that's something that speaks a lot to what may be going on. I mean, do I think that her addiction is a part of all of this? Sure, I do, because that's something that can easily make you unwell if you are that
Mhm.
dependent on any given substance in
Of
order to
course.
get through the day. But I think those two things really working together, but then also just the mental strife of this family where you have Mikey, he's clearly struggling in
Mhm.
a million different ways. Like, we already know everything that's going on with Cousin, even if Richie is in a slightly better place at times in this episode than he is in the present. I mean, the bar's pretty low
Oh.
with that, but like, he's clearly got everything that's happening. Cicero's in this episode, and yeah, he's successful in a lot of ways, but he's not exactly a saint or perfect. Having all of this conflict together at one spot. And then on top of all this, she really wants respect and appreciation for this meal. And
Mhm.
I have never had the whole seven fishes feast. I know this is a big thing in certain cultures. I grew up in Texas. This was not really a common thing down there, but I cannot imagine how much time it takes to prepare this.
No, I can't imagine. I've never been part of anything like that. My background is Guyanese. We don't have that going on in our background, but it was it was a feast. I mean,
Yeah,
it really like besides what looked in the kitchen with the sauce on the ceiling or
yeah,
whatever, but like the actual feast looked incredible. But you did mention cousins, so let's talk
yeah.
about Richie because how did him and Tiff fall apart? Like how did this really happen? There was so much love and fun and silliness and they're making faces at each other and he's so caring with her and we've seen that caring now in the present as well with Richie, but like what happened? I know that Richie can sometimes be a lot,
Yeah.
obviously. But the love that was there and the fun and the silliness and all of that, like, was it the lie about the job that ended up really breaking everything apart? I mean, he did tell Tiff that he had the job
Mhm.
with, Cicero. Cicero backed him up and was like, yeah, he does
Yeah.
even though it's not exactly true, but can it be worked out? It's just like what he's trying. Like, Tiff is like, oh, I found this house. Oh, it's a little bit expensive, but maybe we can figure it out. Richie wants to make it happen. Like he's
Yeah.
really trying to find a way. Even when he was talking to Jimmy, he's like, I don't necessarily just want a job. Like I basically want a mentorship. I want to know how you do what you do so I can do what you do and I can make a better life for my family. Like Richie is all in on Tiff and their unborn daughter, like absolutely all in. What happened?
I think he's well intentioned. I also think that he is so desperate to be the good guy. Please, Tiff, make it seem like they have a future that I believe that this is probably not the only thing that Richie has lied to her about because I think he's trying to present her with this sort of perfect image that everything can go well. And yeah, it's possible something goes really awry with this job, this truth comes out, and maybe this is the catalyst for a lot of other things
Mhm.
that come out. But I think it kind of comes down to this question that Richie seems to ask himself a lot, which is, am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough?
Yep.
Am I skilled enough?
Mhm.
And in the present, it doesn't feel like he's really gotten over whatever happened here with Tiff. And I don't think he ever really will. I think this is going to haunt him. And I understand it seems like at the core, he had a really good thing going here and he found a
Yeah.
way to lose it.
She feels like he was, she was the love of his life, like, and
Yeah.
he lost it. And speaking of the love of your life, Claire, you're not it. So we had, Mikey and cousin, everybody being like, hey, we ran into Claire Bear. Guess what? She's a hottie now. She's, whatever, whatever. She's still, it's the love of your life. Like, you should go for this. And Carmi's like, his reaction felt very genuine, where he was like, the love of my life. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? She's not the love of my life. He said it very plainly, not the love of my life. And it feels like that was very intentional to be there for what's going on in the present. Because my tinfoil hat theory has
Mhm.
been that Claire is and has been, thirsty for Carmi since they were young. And Carmi likes her okay, but that he's more likes the idea of being with Claire than actually Claire, that she's not the one for him, but he just thinks like, I should probably, like, it's time to have a girlfriend or have somebody in my life. She likes me. She's a beautiful woman. She's a nice person. This could work, that sort of thing. I know lots of people that have, kind of got started in relationships by being like, it's time and this person is here and I think I can make it work, but they're not really the one. So having this in the flashback where she's really being pushed on him as like the love of his life, where he's just like, that's just not true. She's not the love of my life. Like, why does this have to be a thing right now? I'm not even really here. Like, I'm in Copenhagen living on a boat with a fake cat. Like, come
Yeah.
on.
He clearly knows it. And, I think you're probably right. I think he knows it in the present too. I think this is just a situation where he's got to figure it out for himself. And I said this in the last video too, that he just has to sort of understand that, okay, he's chasing something. He's chasing like a little bit of a temporary break of happiness to find something that means a lot to him outside of the job. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
us understand that. Like, we can be proud of our work, but at the same time, like, we got to have something that makes us feel good when, we clock out for the day. He's
For sure.
really searching for that. And he might think on some level, maybe this is it, but I think he knows that he deserves something more than that. And I think I would want to believe that he would want the same thing ultimately for Claire as well, even if Claire feels like he's the one. If he's not, then just let her know so that eventually she can find that for herself. I want to think that we'll get there. The Bear is a pretty dark, intense show at times,
Mhm.
since this entire episode, but I don't think that they're going to make it that, Carmi and Claire just end up together and they're never fully happy. That just
No.
sounds depressing.
What I also really liked about this episode was seeing Carmi with his mom in a way that I was like, they are very similar.
Hmm.
Like seeing how they both deal with stress, it's the same. Like it's just pure chaos in the kitchen, everything everywhere. And I know Carmi's more like, oh, well, we'll clean it, but it's still that same stress, chaos where he can't deal with stress, she can't deal with stress, but when they do calm down, they are very sensitive people. Like there's a lot in between that's mirrored with him and his mom. They're very similar.
Yeah, and I wonder how much Carmi is aware of that. I don't know if he's never really been the guy who's been super self-aware of all of his surroundings. I
And
think
neither is his mom.
No, they're really not. I think he does sort of understand that his whole family have a lot of issues that they're trying to tackle, and nobody really knows exactly how to deal with them. Like, he's working to improve in the present. Like, we've
Mhm.
seen him go to
Yep.
these meetings. So I think he's trying to better himself on some way. I mean, is it all going to work out? That's what we have to figure out. I think overall, this episode is extremely, extremely memorable. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go watch the Ted Lasso Christmas special to make myself feel better after watching this. This is that I can't make this a holiday tradition. I'm
Well,
sorry.
that's the thing is like now that I know what the family was like,
Yeah.
very important episode for that. Now that I know what the family is like, when he came back and Sugar was having that talk to be like, you haven't seen mom and, what's going on. It's
Mhm.
kind of like, is she alive in the present? Is kind of what my question is because have you seen mom yet doesn't necessarily mean like
Mhm.
is have you called her, have you gotten in touch, like it could be going to visit her at her grave. I don't know, I suspect that she's alive, but are we going to actually see her in the present?
I think it's a fair question, and I think what's very interesting about the people that they did cast in these roles is that they're all very meaningful to Carmi, but you also are not going to be able to get like 5 episodes of Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, you're going to have to be
No.
very, very diplomatic and economical with like, okay, if we're going to bring her back as Donna in the present, maybe we can have one episode, maybe we can have one scene. We're going to have to try to find a way to make it work. And I'm sure whether it's the rest of this season or season 3, we're going to get an answer.
Yeah, because this is the thing about Donna. Like now, Carmi has been back for a pretty significant amount of time. Why hasn't she come to the restaurant at all? I feel that
Yeah.
she would be there at that point, that she would have shown up. She would be like calling him a million times a day. His phone would just be ringing off the hook from her. She's not somebody who's like, let me just take a step back, like, whatever. Like, it's kind of weird getting to know her the way that we have, and that she has just like, she's a ghost.
Yeah, it's a huge question that the show needs to answer, and I feel like they will. Everything that happens on The Bear is for a pretty calculated reason, even if we don't always agree with all of it. I really appreciate the effort, the writing, the acting that was put into all of this. Like, it is such a huge swing to do an episode that is this uncomfortable and this cringeworthy. And I am happy to let the memories just sit in my head of watching this forever. I don't need to relive them. And like I said, it's not an insult so much as just this particular style of cringe is not for me. I like cringe when I can just sort of make fun of the people that I'm watching because it doesn't feel all that real, like on the White Lotus or on the Curse that we're watching right now. This just feels too real, and so I can't actually spoof anyone.
It felt very real. Yeah, and very intense and very dark, very sad. I mean,
Yeah.
Donna crying by herself in the kitchen after creating that feast. I mean, it really hit me in the heart. Like this
Yeah.
this is a wonderful episode put together, the
Mhm.
acting, the all the writing, all of it. But it is a difficult watch.
Yeah. Well, of course, we will be back to do the rest of the Bear season 2. We're in
Mhm.
the home stretch now, so hit that subscribe button so you guys do not miss any of our other coverage.
Mhm.
Thank you to our patrons as well
Thank
for
you.
your support, and we'll see you here next time.